So now I'd like to welcome back Caroline, Michael and Martyn to have a quick discussion about some of the issues that they have raised. And I think what I'd like to do is perhaps start with Caroline and just, you know, the complexity of the reforms that you outlined and the number of different and varying reforms and guidelines. What's your reaction to that VCAT finding of you know, we're putting so much effort into trying to achieve affordable housing outcomes and they're not enforced? How would you respond?
Look, thanks for the question. I actually just put a note in the comments. It's really interesting because the National Housing Accord was explicitly seeking support from local government for the delivery of affordable housing. But this case demonstrates that without the policy support at the state level, and in Victoria, it's state government that sets the broader strategic planning policy that then impacts on the delivery of housing, and combined with that statutory controls to require the delivery or support the delivery of affordable housing. I think it demonstrates that council can support it, but they don't have the levers to require it. And ultimately, as I do remind government representatives in any meeting that I sit in, government creates the policy and the statutory requirements, but the majority of housing in Australia is delivered by the private sector. And the decision-making factors that sit around the private sector delivering housing is everything that Michael had on that slide. It's interest rates, it's land availability, it's planning permit processes, it's skills, it's materials supply. So local government doesn't have control over any of that, and nor does state or federal government really. So unless we can require it in statutory provisions and policy, it's unlikely to be delivered.
Yeah, yeah. And Michael, I might just get your take on this too. And there's a great question there from Mark Snape from NBN about just how are the housing targets going to be met? I mean, you had, you know, such a great insight into the number of barriers and challenges facing the construction sector and development sector. What are your thoughts? And just to put Martyn on guard, then I'm going to come to him next for some ideas of what else Gosnells might be doing.
I worry that the narrative appears to be one that planning authorities and councils aren't creating enough permissions, and that setting a target is a target for permissioning without, to Caroline's point, looking at how do you deliver? Because from where I sit, we do not have the depth in the supply chains, particularly for infill development. I mean, this is the other thing. We're going to have this unequal dialogue around the role of greenfield. I mean, greenfield is relatively stable, well understood, often with large developers with multi-year programs. Yes, there are fragmented holdings that do come on a bit slower, but they do come on. And I think there will be a tension between the certainty and responsiveness of the greenfield market and the complexity of trying to do infill as it relates to deliverability. So I'm waiting. There needs to be an orchestrator. Someone needs to say, hey, you know what, we actually don't have enough construction sand, which is true. So there's, in terms of labour and materials, we have sub-markets that can access things, but in aggregate, when you're looking at these big numbers, there will be pressure on timber, construction sand, the trades, even the balance sheet of some of the companies. They're not going to want to take all that risk on in such an uncertain time. So I don't think we have the preconditions in place to hit the targets, but I think the targets are very much framed as a government sector, create the permissions. So I think you might get the permissions with a green tick, but you won't get the delivery with a green tick.
Yeah. Agreed. And Martyn, to come to you, I mean, Gosnells, you know, had this great project, infill, underutilised land. And as the developer, did you come across some of those barriers, the construction costs, the labour shortages, and just would love to get your sense in Perth more broadly, I suppose, about, you know, infill targets and how you think and our City of Gosnells thinks greenfield will continue unabated, or will it be will it come back?
Yeah, good question. I think in terms of the ability to provide land, in terms of the construction sense, we've not had difficulties in delivering that. We're just about to start on a 51 lot light industrial commercial site. In fact, I think there's only one lot left to sell, but we haven't quite broken earth, but we will be in the next couple of weeks. Interestingly, we had 4 stages, and because of the level of interest, we basically had to go back to the tender docs, and that was what's caused the delay in starting construction, because we've had to go out all 4 stages at once. No issues with the materials. We've now, I think, come through that post-COVID period where materials are available. In terms of the building industry in WA, lots of a bit like over East, a lot of building companies are going bust, mainly because of the commitments they made at the old price point. So they made commitments for properties that they just can't achieve now with the increase in wood and steel and brick, etc., which was to be expected. And I think the position we took was that we'd been on basically a plateau for many, many years where there'd been almost no increase in prices for building materials. So we're probably now where we would have been had there been a sort of a continuous growth in that space. So we haven't been stressing about that. Our complication is approvals, really very much around the state's ability to keep up. We've had our planning scheme sitting in with the Planning Commission now for getting on towards 3 years. And that's really holding up lots of issues around rezoning. I've got probably 4 or 5 projects, including going into built form, because we're very keen to do demonstration residential properties which are low cost, obviously because the level of low socioeconomic suburbs we have within our city, but still really hitting all those points in terms of cheap to heat, cheap to cool, really pleasant to live in as a property, and meeting all those things. But I'm waiting for rezoning to come through, so 2 lot subdivisions become 3, and this type of thing, and that's been our complication. Contaminated sites, a lot of our sites we've inherited because they were contaminated, and then getting through the environmental approval process for that, where we seem to be getting into the zero risk position. We all know there's risks associated with contamination. They can be mitigated, well-established methods of doing that, but it's almost as if the approvers don't necessarily believe you can. It's really quite an interesting time we're going through. But no, we're pretty excited about the future, really excited about actually getting some residential development done. And once again, looking to perhaps show the building industry there's another way that you can do this. And I suppose we're not driven necessarily by the profit margin, although we do make profit, because we need that to obviously keep going in terms of our business unit. But at the same time, we can seriously explore some options on providing a better home for our community.
Yeah, great. Wonderful, and well done on all that you're doing. And we've just got 1 minute left, so I'm just going to quickly ask Caroline and Michael on the theme of Michael's presentation. Is there a silver bullet? Is it putting development in the hands of councils like in Gosnells, or is getting planning scheme amendments through the silver bullet? In 30 seconds or less, each of you, what do you think it is? Caroline.
I think there needs to be a direct funding injection from government. I think the commercial conditions at the moment are not conducive to the private sector delivering at the scale that's required. we need 220,000 houses over the next 5 years-ish each year. And yet pre-COVID, the average was around 200,000. But I actually just checked year on year, approvals for dwellings are down 23% in August 2023. So we're trending downwards, not upwards. So I think it's going to be a challenge if we leave it in the hands of the private sector. I think government needs to step in some capacity and at least deliver some of it.
Yeah, great. Michael, final word on this issue.
Yeah, I think there's two things that should be pursued. So one is the idea of an orchestrator. The market can't solve this on its own, and it will be really inefficient for them to try and do that. And the second, which relates to that, is there's a lot of uniqueness in our system. Everyone has different schemes. We all build different stuff, but the laws of physics is the same around the country. We should be able to come up with some schemes that are repeatable, scalable, and more efficient to deliver. They need to be quality schemes, but then you can start looking at prefab modular options that are built in factories, quicker, that are less labour intensive, perhaps even safer. But that needs someone needs to organise that, and I think that's the call.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. Some great ideas there for us and others to pursue. So thanks again, Caroline, Michael and Martyn, and to Will on video. Really enjoyed this conversation.